and gentlemen, for the duration of this hour, we are joined by former top stockbroker, even worked with George Soros' son, author. He runs MaxKeiser.com. He is Max Keiser. He's done shows with BBC, RT, Press TV, syndicated radio. The list goes on and on. And he has traveled the world. He broke down years before what would happen in Iceland. He predicted with stunning precision what would happen in 2008. And he is over in Europe. He's traveled to Spain. He lives in France, England. He was there during the ongoing riots of austerity in Greece, reporting live for us with hundreds of thousands in the streets chanting in the background. I was on his TV show yesterday, one of his TV shows, international TV shows, and he was talking about, hey, I think the collapse is basically imminent. And Max is usually, well, it's down the road. So I said, whoa, we better get you on my show to get an update on that. But also HSBC funding Al-Qaeda, big banks caught laundering more drug money, running more aircraft. I mean, this is the mafia. Big banks create fake derivatives. They buy everybody off with it. They run things. They want austerity. Most of the debt is theirs. They convince you that you've got to have your pension fund taken, even private ones, because you're lazy. Now they've gotten to, your private pension fund is lazy welfare. Give it to us. Because they want to impoverish you. It's a banker occupation. So Max Keiser joins us to talk about the LIBOR scandal. Everything we've talked about is now public. EMF Global, all of it. I mean, it's just, there it is, brazen criminals, and now there's suddenly, before it was like every few weeks there'd be an article 5 years ago. Then 3 years ago it was every few days. Now, hundreds of articles a day. In blogs, newspapers, TV, announcing foreign banks took over. They do control derivatives. If you don't do what they say, they'll implode the economy. We're holding you hostage, but we know best. We're the technocrats. Unelected tyranny is good. We're going to forcibly inoculate you. And they have Austinites moving into a giant concentration camp at the old airport, getting partially free rent, free Volt cars with cameras in their homes watching them. I just read that from mainstream news earlier. We're entering a total Twilight Zone situation, and he coined the gulag, the casino gulag economy. He said that like 5 years ago on our show. Now they pay you to play video games online, but it's not really paying you. I mean, it is a hell world with cross-species animals everywhere, GMO exempt with diplomatic immunity, forcing you to eat it. The UN murdering people everywhere for their land, endless wars, Al-Qaeda being hailed in the news as heroes in Syria. I mean, we are entering an upside-down crazy world by design where people just give in to anything. That's my rant. Max Keiser, break down those subjects. What do you want to go through first? What's happening with the global economy? Why are you saying we're inching towards a meltdown as the U.S. military admits they're getting ready for martial law in October? We're not saying that's going to happen. We told you before it was in the news. Now it's admitted. Armored pillboxes, automatic weapons, 40 caliber bullets, 450 million of them, surveillance, drones, checkpoints. What is happening, Max Keiser?
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me on. I think the reason I make that comment has to do with the LIBOR scandal, because the LIBOR scandal is a new level of scandal, if you will. First of all, it works its way into the central banking system. So we have the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve Bank are implicated in this LIBOR scandal. We haven't had the central banks caught red-handed manipulating markets like this really before. And additionally, the LIBOR scandal itself is different because usually we have these instances where traders at banks are identified as rogue traders. They commit what are called fat finger trades. They lose billions of dollars. And the bank always says, well, it's an isolated situation. And then
they always commit suicide or murder, too. And we've seen some of that happening last week. Sorry.
Not enough, in my opinion. We need to see a lot more of that and a lot less passive resistance. But to finish on this idea, the nature of the LIBOR scandal itself, by definition, requires two or more parties at different banks working in collusion to manipulate interest rates. So by definition is a RICO. It's a syndicated. It would come under the auspices of being prosecuted under racketeering.
It's a conspiracy.
It is by definition a conspiracy, because the only way, nobody doubts that this took place. And if it did take place, it could only happen if there was a conspiracy, if there was a collusion amongst these bankers. So this opens up an enormous amount. Some are calling it the banking industry's tobacco moment, because the LIBOR rate is tied to over $500 trillion in securities around the world. And all of those people now have cause to sue the banks and the central banks and Timothy Geithner and Mervyn King and everybody else involved. And it's going to be an astronomically large sum of money that is going to fundamentally change the banks. And what will happen, Alex, is that the banks, as they're being sued because of the LIBOR scandal, will have to disclose finally some transparency on their books. So we'll find out that JP Morgan is in fact insolvent by a factor of 10 times their current market capitalization. Societe Generale in France is insolvent. BNP in France is insolvent. Deutsche Bank, which has 60-to-1 leverage on its balance sheet, is insolvent by a factor of 20 or 30 times its current market capitalization. And as this information filters its way through the system, these banks will implode, and this will be the coup de grace of this huge scandal. If you thought that the Facebook IPO dropping 50% after 2 or 3 weeks, which is something, by the way, I said on my show, I said was an absolute dead certainty, but the Facebook stock would drop by a minimum of 50% within 3 months of the IPO. And that's exactly what happened, because that is a hologram of fraud, a Ponzi scheme with no business model. These banks,
hold on, let me stop you. It's now come out that they've got bots 80% overcharging the clicks. I mean, it's now come out that Nielsen is a fraud. Of course, everything's a fraud. It's all fraud.
Well, that's right. Bots are creating the illusion of commercial activity. That means that the whole Facebook business model is a fraud. But these same bots are at work on the New York Stock Exchange. Just this morning, Alex, we had a huge New York Stock Exchange flash, crash, and then recovery event tied to a company called Knight Ridder, who's a market maker. And they now are involved in a massive investigation for algorithmic rigging of the stock market, and they do this in order to squeeze a few pennies of profits out on top of the massive profits they already make, but they end up fundamentally putting at risk the structure of the exchange itself. So it won't be long now before the exchange just collapses under the weight of its own algorithmic fraud, and this, of course, sets in motion a chain reaction amongst other exchanges and banks around the world. So nobody has done anything. Remember the May of 2010 flash crash? Nobody did anything to put any safeguards in place to stop the exact same thing from happening again.
And the derivatives have gotten worse. All the and as things prepare to implode, they only engage in more reckless stealing. So we're talking about a biblical level collapse here.
Well, the derivative situation has gotten worse for 2 reasons. Number one, the total amount of outstanding derivatives has gone up. But the underlying economy that supports the derivatives has gotten smaller, because all of the 20 G20 nations around the world are in contraction. If you want to really look at it with a gross domestic product number that adequately reflects true inflation numbers, they're all in contraction. So the derivative problem is being magnified by the fact that not only are the number of contracts rising, but the economic activity that is the underlying collateral for that activity is shrinking. So you have the austerity measures in Europe, the austerity measures in the UK are causing tax receipts to plummet, which are causing the ability for government to fund itself to drop, which means they go more into the derivative market to help fake their way through the crisis, which of course creates this dynamic of rising fake derivative manipulated nonsense on top of an ever shrinking collateral pool. Those two things get to a point where they're completely unsustainable. And the LIBOR scandal, I believe, will be the wedge that is the final wedge to create this chasm that you drop, like Iceland, into the abyss of global currency collapse.
And Max Keiser, what is the time frame, your best guess, dead reckoning, estimation on the LIBOR scandal destroying what confidence is left in the giant Ponzi scheme operation?
20 minutes. No, I'm like it. No, it's Alex. The time is, I would, we're now entering we're in the second half of 2012. Clearly what's happening in Europe is the banks are incapable of stemming the tide of collapse that is now sweeping through the European banking system. And their solution will be to create another 10 to 15 million euros in money printing to help bail out these banks. That will probably be commensurate on the timing of this, where it's always difficult to make a prediction on a timing, but I've been pretty good on that in the past. So I will say that within the next 9 months, we will have an event that will make 2008 collapse seem minor by comparison.
I want to come back and talk about how the establishment will respond, what new power grab they're going to ask for to fix the crisis they created. And I want to tie this into war. I mean, they're not going to implode something like this without having a big war to get us to all rally around the crooks. So I want to get Max Keiser's take on the Ayatollah over in Iran saying war in 2 weeks and a lot more. Ladies and gentlemen, we've all got front row seats to Armageddon. Deadlines and commitments.
Deadlines and commitments.
All right, we are back live. Thank you so much for joining us. The globalists are running against the wind of history that tyrants will fall. They think all their high-tech gadgetry is going to protect them. They got another thing coming. They've tried to wreck the U.S. culture. All they've done is wreck people they can wreck. Those of us that are resistant or immune to their brainwashing, it's only served to aggravate us. That which does not kill us only makes us stronger. Max Keiser at maxkeiser.com, financial TV, radio host, former stockbroker, financial expert. So now suddenly it's not Max Keiser 5 years ago or Alex Jones or Paul Craig Roberts or Bob Chapman or countless others breaking down what was coming, the mathematical facts. Now it's Larry Summers. All of them are like, there's a total catastrophe coming. The only answer is give us total power over your lives. So now they've shifted from, oh, yeah, we never really left the recession, as if we need them to tell us that, to total destruction, except for advertisements they put on about how things are getting better, invest in the stock market today, what's being pumped up artificially by the plunge protection team. So how do they plan on getting out of this without going to jail like Bernie Madoff when they've committed crimes? How much bigger are the top banks' crimes in the aggregate compared to Bernie Madoff? What, hundreds of times bigger, Max Keiser?
It's funny you say about putting these white-collar criminals into prison. And, of course, the prisons in America are privatized. They're owned by private corporations. And many of them, like Corrections Corps of America, are listed on the stock exchange. I can imagine, Alex, if you put a group of stockbrokers and brokers in one of these jails, they will free themselves by organizing a leveraged buyout of the jail, taking the jail private, releasing themselves, and then selling the jail once again to the public and making profit in the spread. In other words, the economy is so infiltrated with financialization and white-collar crooks, Wall Street crooks, and all the GDP, all the activity is tied to trading in some way, and all the trading is totally corrupt. You can't really take the corruption out of the system at this point because there's really nothing else but corruption. So it's like a car that is 80% rusted out. If you took the rust away, there would be no car at all. If you took corruption away, financial Wall Street corruption away from the American and the British economy, there would be literally nothing left. So these guys have figured out a way to imbue themselves into the system, to really attach themselves to the system like a parasite, and they are really hardwired into the system. And I thought what might be interesting, Alex, is that a lot of people are curious about market manipulation. We've been talking about it on your show for years, and now that people understand that these markets are being manipulated, it might be interesting for people to understand a little bit more about how to actually manipulate the price on one of these exchanges. Because I used to do it myself when I was working on Wall Street, and it's the same technique, except now they use high-frequency trading and algorithmic trading. But the technique is basically the same. And it involves what are called wash trades. And the way this works, Alex, is that if a stock is trading at $100 a share and you're trying to manipulate the price to 101 or 102, you simultaneously put on a buy and sell order at 101 or 102. So the ticker tape, when it goes across, it'll show a transaction at that higher price. But that transaction actually didn't cost you anything because it was simultaneously buy and sell. It was a wash trade. This is illegal. But it's done now with high-frequency trading and algorithmic trading billions of times a day. This morning, the fraud on the New York Stock Exchange involved hundreds of millions of transactions in the space of less than an hour. So there's no way to actually the authorities to step in there and to stop it, because the high-frequency traders, Alex, believe it or not, they're only constrained with their computer technology by the speed of light. That's how fast these traders are going now. They are doing trades in billionths of a second. And so obviously the law enforcement can't possibly keep up with this. But essentially that's the way they manipulate prices up or down. Now, if you have a stock like IBM and you are manipulating the price, let's say from 100 to 101 or 102, and if you simultaneously put an option trade on one of the various options exchanges, knowing that there's going to be a price differential coming either up or down, you simply put on that trade on the New York Stock Exchange, move the price up or down by a few percentage points, and immediately book your profits in the option market. And this is what we did all the time on Wall Street, and variations on this theme. But it's very rare to find trading these days that is just people coming together and buying and selling in a traditional
Exactly.
fashion. It's
all a giant matrix-like fraud absorbing the real world. And the bankers are so hungry, they're now taking houses they don't even own. Max Keiser of MaxKeiser.com is our guest. I'm Alex Jones, and this isn't a game. I could sit here and go over 100 different articles where different world leaders, a lot of them who were involved in this premeditated criminal takeover of the real economy by the fraudsters. But you've seen the quotes out there. You've heard us cover the news. My question is, they're clearly gearing up for a bunch of new wars. The Ayatollah over in Iran is saying brace for war the next 2 weeks. I don't know if that's the case, but these are going from war drums to al-Qaeda proxy armies attacking. I want to get into all of that with Max Keiser, but let's go over a bunch of financial issues here after we finish up on this question, because I want to get into HSBC and the drug running and the al-Qaeda. I mean, that's all over the news, just all of it. That's the thing about corruption, folks, is they always push the envelope, and it automatically will then sink to the most horrible thing you can imagine. Just like all over the U.S., they're saying you can't have water fall in your own garden now. We're going to arrest you 30 days in jail. That was in the news this week. All over, they're taking houses that are totally paid for. I mean, forget just triple selling the deed. They don't care if confidence is destroyed. They're converting it to prisons and checkpoints, and if you're in the in crowd, your house doesn't get taken, or you're allowed to travel. I mean, they really want a 1984 world where these globalists are offshore, they're tax exempt, they've written the laws, they pay little or no taxes, and they can just get away with anything. The problem is in the bravada, hubris, chutzpah, fueled madness of these people, they're trying to start wars now with Russia, who's wildly corrupt and has its own problems, but is not, this brand of insanity. And, of course, they're infiltrated as well. This is a scientific, fraudulent takeover that Max was talking about, where they have created over 1,000 trillion of garbage, gotten governments to sign on to it, and they lecture us all day that it's our taxes, have to pay this off, and then they raise the taxes knowing good and well it's going to implode the economy and actually lower tax receipts, which makes government then fall apart and then become more predatory. I mean, it is a hellish plan. Max, how does war fit into this? Because clearly they want to launch the next big implosion during a war because they think people will rally around them. Then they can have their buddies, al-Qaeda, stage an attack or take the blame for an attack. and then really come after the people of Europe and the United States' freedoms. They got the military ready for martial law. That's now admitted. Secretary of the Army says they want to put troops in every city. It's starting. I mean, this is a takeover. We are being captured by the bankers who brag about it. So how will they try to complete this takeover, and is there any way to stop them?
Well, war has always been a handy profit-making enterprise for entrenched kleptocrats. What's interesting is that the U.S. is not waging war abroad; they're waging war domestically against itself. So this is tyranny. So this is the definition of tyranny. When the government wages war against itself, that's tyrannical. And this is what the U.S. government is doing. By stripping away all of the civil rights after 9/11, they opened the floodgate to the worst elements of government who are now in charge and attacking itself. And this is tyrannical. And they're doing so without any conscious adherence to any known democratic principle, constitutional principle, or economic principle. It's economic suicide, it's constitutional suicide. And so the war is, as you say, I guess sometimes the 360 full spectrum, the war is both America fighting itself in a war against itself as an attempt to snuff out its own democratic institutions, as well as fighting wars abroad, fighting wars all over the world. So clearly that's unsustainable ideologically and economically.
Max, do me a favor, tip your camera down for people watching at prisonplanet.tv. Thank you, sir, because we want to get a good look at you there so we can put your bio and name under you there, maxkeiser.com. Max, well, I mean, it's the bankers using the U.S. as their giant attack goblin, but debilitating us at the same time. What is their out strategy? I mean, I see all these big billionaires that made their money off fraud, off manipulating markets and government contracts. They're all buying armored keeps in different rural areas of the world with private security details. I mean, why would they want to do something like this? I mean, you've described it. You call it suicide bankers, right? I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, it's not like the bankers are hurting at the moment. They're making record profits. And if you look at the prices of things that the bankers are buying, the prices are going up. I just saw a listing in New York City for a 3 or 4 floor apartment that is selling for $100 million. That is one apartment on sale, $100 million. And if you go to cities around the world, London in particular, New York, Paris, Moscow, you find that unbelievable wealth is putting money into apartments. They're putting money into art. The art market, the high end of the art market is continuing to see higher and higher bids, precious metals, precious jewels. So they're getting fabulously rich. What I see here is a conflict between a modernity and medievalism. And what I mean by that is that in order to keep the population in line, the government is returning to a pre-enlightened medieval society where knowledge is kept hidden or monopolized by a few. And I saw something today, Alex, which is a perfect example of this. There's a new hedge fund launching on Wall Street that is going to be based entirely on superstition. So the hedge fund, it has algorithms and bots that go into the market and make trades, avoiding like number 13, avoiding the mention of black cat, and they amass all of the superstitions from around the world, and then they have algorithms that try to trade around those superstitions. So what the elite are doing, they're trying to capitalize on this return to a superstitious belief system in society that has completely walked away from the age of enlightenment.
Well, that's right. Let me stop you right there. That is absolutely key. They've even admitted in documentaries about MTV, they are trying to dumb it down. That's why you watch things now, and it's something that a mentally retarded child would like. And this is done by design. It's so horrible.
I lived in a flat in Paris 2 years ago, which is where Denis Diderot lived when he was here living in Paris during the Enlightenment. And he's famous for creating the first encyclopedia. And of course, part of the Enlightenment was to take the knowledge from the church and put it into the hands of the people. Now we have the reverse. We have the knowledge of how to trade derivatives with a hedge fund that's got an algorithm searching for superstitions. That information is held behind a very high gate that is completely inaccessible by the masses, while it scoops up billions and billions of dollars from these markets in a way that's completely against any known economic principle other than medieval feudalism. And this is why these guys continue to get rich. The peasant class, which is us, which is you, which is me, who are being abused by this new monarchy and aristocracy, are being deprived of our access to meaningful information. We have, through the internet, access to an incredible array of information, but we do not have access to the algorithms that you can let loose into the stock market to automatically create arbitrage situations or high-frequency trading that is, in effect, just taking or stealing money out of the market. The Goldman Sachs high-frequency trading bot steals $100 million every single day. They have a computer that's parked right next to the New York Stock Exchange. They call it co-location. It's there to front-run trades and to siphon off money. If I put a tube in your neighbor's car and I siphon gas from your neighbor's car, that's stealing. And yet Goldman Sachs says they've siphoned cash from the New York Stock Exchange, and their defense is that they're making a market or they're adding liquidity. That's complete rubbish. It's just pure theft.
Now, Max, again, it's been ruled this is illegal, but they have the regulators in every position. Now I want to move quickly before we take some calls here. Monsanto, as you know, has a bill introduced as a rider, looks like it may pass, to allow them to just get everything approved without approval, even of their own scientists and lawyers they've put in at the FDA, and to give them liability protection where they can do anything they want. I mean, now it's reaching, literal godlike behavior by these people. Separately, we've got them talking about QE3. Let's get into the bankers wanting to sell carbon credits. I saw this a few months ago. They're about to get global diplomatic immunity when they sell carbon credits. I mean, they are making themselves, under this global government, absolutely exempt from their laws, but then they put laws on us saying we have absolutely no rights and are slaves. I mean, it's got to come to a head, and their answer is militarize the police and have a bunch of drones attack us.
Well, let's talk about the Monsanto issue first. The Monsanto is a particularly heinous corporation in that they sell these Terminator seeds. These are seeds that don't reproduce, so they have to be purchased every single year. So you're basically putting a boot on the throat of God and saying, you can't, these seeds don't reproduce. Only Monsanto can reproduce. Furthermore, they sell fertilizer that only works with those seeds. Again, the costs are astronomical. That's why something like 2,000 Indians in India are committing suicide. I think it's on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. It could even be on a daily basis. Costs
yeah, they drink the Monsanto poison to off themselves, yes.
Right. So now this is happening, and of course, if these seeds are, and this is happening in Canada, and now it's happening in the United States, the seeds are blown by the wind in somebody else's farm, and then they sprout, unknown to that farmer. But Monsanto lawyers show up and say, we're going to sue you or arrest you for patent theft. The farmer had no idea that the wind blew these seeds into their farm, and yet they have the temerity to say, you are committing patent theft. And so they take these people to court. And then, of course, they can't have the wherewithal, the money to go against Monsanto. And Monsanto just keeps winning these lawsuits. And it's similar to, we saw something in Bolivia where the people did not have access to rainwater. Then they sued Bechtel, the corporation that was imposing this, and they won. So where did Bechtel and these other people come? They come to America, right there in Texas. You don't have access to your own rainwater.
That's right. Bechtel comes in, buys up reservoirs that are paid for by the citizens, doubles, triples the prices, and they call that privatization. No, it's called robbery, and now they're securitizing and leveraging the water and to drive the price up. And now that's why they're announcing all over the U.S., you're not allowed to have rainwater on your own yard now. You're going to pay a tax for that, and they're going around arresting people with rainwater collection tanks.
Right. Now, on the carbon, first of all, when you look at these things in total, you come to the conclusion that all of this lawyering around the world with the banking institutions around the world, this is really a global group of people. I mean, this idea that you have of a new world order, which 5 years ago, a lot of people were not willing to see how the United States could be gobbled up or subsumed by a global clique of lawyers and bankers. It seemed far-fetched. And yet here you have corporations like Monsanto, which are attacking Americans with the help of a global clique of lawyers and bankers. That is a new world order, if you want to put it in those terms. That's exactly what that is. And when you have no way to redress, who do you go after exactly? Because this is now a global court and a global bank that answers only to itself. That completely supersedes the Constitution. It's just like in Greece. When Greece started to get into trouble, the government signed what was called a memorandum, which gave the Troika, which is the IMF, EU, and ECB, power over the country's constitution. So therefore, at that moment, and in that memorandum, the country of Greece also signed away the rights to all of their country's assets. And this is all that's going on there. These outside forces are bankrupting Greece to take the income-producing assets, the roads, the tolls, the lottery, and they're doing so for virtually no money because they are killing the country.
And then they install whoever they want and brag that the bankers are installing the leaders in Italy and Greece and Ireland and everywhere. I mean, it's incredible. So is the sky the limit? I mean, they're just God because they're fraudulent crooks. And by the way, they're eugenicists. That's what the bankers are into, is killing us. I guess they've stolen everything. They plan to kill us with a bioweapon release. These are really nice people.
Well, here's what I would ask you. Here's my answer, Alex. You say, how far can it go? How far will these global banking crooks go? I would ask you this question. How low can we go? How low, how much pain are we going to take before something snaps? That's the question. Because they're never going to stop. They're programmed to take all the money, just like cancer is programmed to take it all. So that's not the question. We know the answer. What they intend to do, they intend to create a global peasantry. When they are the aristocrats. They want to go back to the 16th century, the 15th century, the 14th century. So that's not the question. The question is not how high will they go? How low are we going to go? How far down are we willing to go? That's the question. And I don't know the answer to that because I don't see any evidence right now that people have decided that enough is enough.
Well, I'll tell you why, Max. I'll tell you why, Max. You've got a high IQ. You know, people out there that have been successful, type A personalities, don't want to be pushed around. The average person, even if they're somewhat smart, is passive and thinks everybody's like them, so they're just trying to be helpful and friendly. And because the globalists wear suits and ties, they must be nice men, just like why women got in the car with Ted Bundy. And so you have to understand, a lot of people are physically in a trance. They watch TV all day. They think of themselves as these passive creatures that just kind of go through life. But what the globalists have to understand is not all of us are like that, and that's why they think they're going to use the military and the police. But I got news for the globalists. The military and police worldwide are waking up. You've seen it in Europe. And I think it's going to end up with the globalist getting put in prison. The problem is, like you said, the structure's now in place, so we'll probably just trade out this group for another group. I think as a culture, we have cancer. And as you just said, it's programmed to take it all. And God help us. That's all I can say. God help us.
Well, I'll give you a movie reference, which is interesting. It's very haunting. I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The Green Mile, with Tom Hanks. And there's a character named, his last name is Coffey, John Coffey. It's kind of a, JC, Jesus Christ type character.
Yeah, that's the big NFL player. I met him in a UFC fight. Big black guy with a cool voice.
Big black guy, and he's in this movie. And they're in jail, and Tom Hanks is talking to him, and he's saying, well, the guy who committed the murder, the real murderer, How did he get away with it? And this John Coffey character explains that it was love that killed the little girl. And the way he explained it is that the murderer set up two sisters, and he killed one of the sisters, and he told the other sister that if you loved your sister, you would never tell on him. So he used the idea of love to keep by her silence. Now, I may be getting this plot a little mixed up, but that's essentially the idea, is that love in the wrong hands by a pathologically sick person, it can be used as a disguise to fool people into trusting them and to fool people into thinking that they have a message that they need to respect. The love can be very used in this way.
Oh, no. That's what the tyrants do. It's all about how they love us, and they're going to take the guns, and they're going to take our property, and they're going to brainwash us because they love us.
Right. That's the message. They have a message of love and peace and understanding while they're putting us in prison, stealing our wealth, and destroying our economy. But people respond to love the same way people respond to sugar. It's hard-coded in our being. So we tend to believe it when somebody says, I love you. Our instincts are to believe them. And in that moment, that fraction of an instant is when you lose your money, you lose your economy, and you lose your country.
Yeah, because a bunch of people are posing like liberals and conservatives when they're all part of a criminal group who I was talking to the Goldman Sachs former top executive who made this documentary, A Greater Good, about vaccines killing people. And now all the documents have come out. They know they don't help you. They hurt you. It's actually spreading the disease. And she said she was a Goldman Sachs exec, managing director, and she had this Goldman Sachs, this big pharma guy in the meeting with her. And he said, I'm going to make $7 billion this year killing people. And he thought she was part of the club. That's when she woke up. And he was telling her how much fun it was to kill people with the vaccines. And that's the crazy thing about these people. A lot of them, it's not just about power and stealing and being dominant. They really like killing people. They love the idea as the head of a big company that they're going to kill millions of people and that the hospitals are going to cover it up. I mean, it's like a really big rush for them. Zbigniew Brzezinski writes books and brags about how he triggered a group to kill millions and how cool it is, that he helped put Pol Pot in, who killed 30% of his population. And when he goes and gives a speech, the globalists are in awe of him. It's like, my God, he killed a lot of people. He's really tough. I mean, these are demons.
Well, once you scapegoat a part of the population, then they're marked for death. So in America, the poor have been scapegoated. I mean, during World War II, obviously, ethnic groups were scapegoated, they were vilified, and they were slaughtered. In America, the scapegoating goes on in terms of the poor people. Poor people are considered to be socially misfits, and that they are basically being targeted. And all the rhetoric out there, like a Mitt Romney character, for example, seems to put over this idea. Like he just said, for example, Alex, I got to ask you this question. He said, talking about Israel and Palestine, that Israel was more successful than Palestine because they were culturally superior. How is that different than the same eugenicist message of Hitler in the 30s and 40s?
No, we see this more and more. And look, we have become a very, very dark culture. And even those of us that don't like it have just become accustomed to it, because when you dance with the devil, he doesn't change, he changes you. I want to go to some calls, but they're getting ready for all these big wars. Let me ask you this, because I want to do one more segment after this, but I want to go to calls right now. What do you make of the fact that, a year ago it was in a few newspapers that the West was putting al-Qaeda in Libya. Now it's all over the news, and the London Guardian's like, well, al-Qaeda's got good discipline. They're actually saying al-Qaeda are good guys and work for the West, but then I need to give my rights up because al-Qaeda's hiding under the table.
Well, I saw something today that made me laugh. Vladimir Putin came out with a big statement today and said that he believes that NATO should stay in Afghanistan until the job is done. When you think about it, that's such a beautiful statement because, of course, that's where Russia, the Soviet Union, basically died in Afghanistan. It's where empires go to die. And so the U.S. is embroiled in this Mideast conflagration that looks like it's going to end up in the death of the U.S. empire as well. And so there's Vladimir Putin basically just smiling and saying, yes, go for it, America. NATO should stay in Afghanistan. And of course, Al-Qaeda was working for us back then. Then they switched sides. Now they're working for us again on our side. They go back and forth. They were with us. They were against us. They were with us. And also, you mentioned HSBC earlier, Alex. Now what's come out in the last week, again, to follow up on the story you've been covering for 10 years on 9/11, it now has come out that HSBC funded the 9/11 terrorists. If you connect all the dots, money that they were laundering for terrorists, that's now a headline in major newspapers all over the world, extends back 10 years. So now we know where the funding came from. The $500,000 needed to do the 9/11 attacks, it came in part from HSBC.
And again, it's not just funding it, they're running it. It's like Wells Fargo running the aircraft for the Sinaloa group. I mean, this is who they are. They run it. They are the organized crime, and they're going to take everything we've got, and they've got the police training right now to kill us. And we better reach out to the police now and wake them up. Let's go to Scott in Idaho. You're on the air with Max Keiser. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Max. Thank you both for your efforts in the battle for liberty and the cause of freedom. I have a very brief comment and a question for Max and or yourself.
Okay.
My comment is, what I think I hear you saying, Alex, is that we're fast approaching the stage of the ultimate inversion, the stage where the government is free to do anything it pleases while the citizens can act only by permission, which is the stage of the darkest periods of human history, the stage of rule by brute force. My question is, Alex and Max, it's been my experience over the past few decades that shortly after waking up, many people experience bouts of depression due to the paradigm shift, the new and true reality. What advice can you give people listening to deal with this?
I would say fight in the info war. Get aggressive. You're depressed if you're doing nothing. You're going to be exhilarated and become more vicious with the truth as you fight, as you take scalps of enemies, as you crush the enemy who needs to be driven out. Max Keiser.
No, it's a real good question, because you have to weigh the pros and cons of being awake and maybe suffering the reality of being awake. Or it's like that scene in The Matrix where he decides to go back into the Matrix. The steak tastes great. I don't care that I'm a slave living in the Matrix. I love the taste of this steak, and he wants to go back into the Matrix. It's a very profound moment in that film.
Hold on, more calls coming up. And I want to take a few more calls with Max Keiser. I really can't do justice to this, who the winner of the $10,000 contest is. I'm not going to announce it now because the sheet was in there. I needed it in the last segment. It wasn't. We're in overdrive now, and some stations don't carry this. I'm going to leave these right here, folks. This is a direct thing in front of the whole office. I'm going to leave the winner right here. I'm going to lay it down right here on top of the Time magazine over here. And at the start of the show tomorrow, I will announce the winner, and we will have a piece put together that we will play on the show with some excerpts of some of the runners-up as well. Okay, and you'll get your $10,000. It's indescribable, the great job everybody did. Look, you got to get aggressive with these tyrants. And they can't get away with this if you won't let the TSA stick their hands down your pants, because that's going to be everywhere. Like I told you, that's the new America. It's just a bunch of minders poking at you, yelling at you, because they're getting you ready to be a slave. They're getting ready to get rid of America, get rid of freedom. Braun in Alabama, you're on the air with Max Keiser. Thanks for holding. Welcome.
Thanks for taking my call. I have a specific question about the economy, or rather some strategy. But to speak to what that last caller said, if I can for a minute, I think what people have trouble with in confronting all this stuff about the Matrix and the New World Order is that they also have to confront the fact that they were living in that false system and that they were fooled by it, and maybe it's an embarrassment, or it's just hard to even fathom, or it's also hard to fathom where all this could take us, and they get a little scared by it and back down. And I think that people just need to find some way to focus that energy and improve themselves. Maybe.
Yeah, no, this New World Order road leads to death. Okay, that's the globalist own statements. We've listed it all here. Do you have a quick question for Max Keiser?
Yeah, I study the economy, and my site talks about this a lot on Twitter. The perception that the market is kind of like the large populace, in the sense that they don't seem to grasp the fact that economic collapse could actually happen. All these signs that are happening now, the purchaser, the PMI indexes are crashing around the world. The UK is going into recession, all that stuff. It doesn't faze them, and the behavior.
No, I hear you. I gotta jump because we're out of time. I'm not exactly sure what the question there is. It's more of a statement. Look, folks, they're already in even like the London Telegraph, which is normally pro-banker, saying is it time to start arresting bankers. The good news is we're getting past their puppets, Obama, Romney, Cameron, to the actual globalist. And the globalists are saying that. I mean, they're not invincible, Max. I mean, I think we're going to end up seeing a lot of these folks go to prison. I think humanity's going to wake up.
Well, they're pushing their luck. There was a report that came out today about this hedge fund manager in the Hamptons saying that he's genuinely concerned that a populist uprising will come and attack him, and he feels very vulnerable out there in the Hamptons and Long Island, which is an enclave of many, many rich people. And I think this top group of kleptocrats, these bankers, are beginning to realize that they are very vulnerable. It's really not that difficult to get to them. And as more and more people understand the nature of their crimes, they're going to be motivated to go after them. Now, the question is, are they going to save themselves by reversing their behavior, or are they going to double down on their own fraudulent behavior? History tells us that they double down and they push their luck, and there's a revolution of some type. And we've already seen it in the Middle East, and we've seen huge outbreaks of social unrest already in Europe. I would imagine that in Britain, within 6 months, you'll see what we've seen in Greece, because their economy is in free fall. As soon as the Olympics are over, the next round of economic numbers will be reported. It'll be confirmed that the UK is just teetering above depression. And the people are going to be out in the streets. You had 2 million people out in the streets anti-war, so that we know that they can get out onto the streets. Now, when they'll be out there fighting for themselves, they will be, and they won't be happy.
Well said, Max Keiser, maxkeiser.com. Thank you for spending time with us today. I appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure, Alex.
People will be able to see the TV show we taped, coming up on Friday at your website?
That's right. It's going to be on the famous Alex Jones on the show. Looking forward to it.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you, Max. All right, folks, a lot more coming up in retransmission. See you on the Nightly News tonight. Big show, in-studio guests, 7 o'clock Central, prisonplanet.tv. I will announce the winners at 8 after tomorrow on the radio.